I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about the world according to Leibniz. The Monadology may be a short treatise, but it presents a whole new theory of reality, puzzling yet coherent, unfamiliar yet plausible. The Monadology is Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz's mature view of the metaphysics underlying our reality in 20 pages, developed over decades of pondering over the universe and written around 1714. Yet a good way to begin understanding the Monadology is not to plunge straight in, but to read his earlier Discourse on Metaphysics. Only published posthumously, the Discourse is written in the 1680s, where Leibniz has not yet mentioned, perhaps not yet even conceived, of monads. According to Gonzalo Rodriguez Pereira, whose translation of the Discourse I used, Leibniz's philosophy is an intellectual hymn to God. In the Discourse, Leibniz is laying out the foundation of a metaphysics for Christianity. There is a God who created a multiplicity of substances. God is a perfect being, and hence he acts in the most perfect way, which makes the world he has created the best possible world. God is free and does not act by necessity. Though being perfect, he will always choose the best option. God's work is perfectly rational and orderly. When he acts, he uses the simplest means to obtain the greatest effect. Each substance has a complete concept. Complete means that it includes everything that is true of it, even of the future, its entire history in all its detail. Since the individual notion of a substance contains in it everything that happens to it, all the events that happen to a substance can, in principle, be predicted a priori. Yet for Leibniz, most of what happens to a substance is contingent since the alternatives are logically possible. No two substances are perfectly identical, though they mirror and express each other so perfectly that perfect knowledge of one substance would mean perfect knowledge of every other substance. Thus, what happens to a substance corresponds to what happens to all the others, despite there being no causal action between any two substances. There is, in fact, no interaction between things because all our ideas are innate. The nature of body is not extension. Substantial forms must be acknowledged if bodies are substances, and final causes are useful in physics. Some substances are more perfect than others, and the most perfect of all are intelligent minds, because minds have the capacity to reflect on themselves, which renders them capable of moral qualities. God is the monarch of a perfect republic composed of all minds, and the happiness of minds is God's principal purpose. The Discourse hence contains the following key ideas which we will also find in the Monadology. 1. God's perfection and the best of all possible worlds. 2. Complete concept theory. 3. Pre-established harmony and how each thing mirrors the universe. 4. Idealism. 5. The immaterial nature of mind. While these concepts already form a coherent train of thought at a high level, Leibniz still needs to address what nature must be like in order to lead to the above. His Discourse can be considered a top-down approach to metaphysics, while the Monadology is a bottom-up approach where he answers the question of what the most fundamental thing of all is, the thing of which all other things are composed, such that it can lead to the high-level metaphysics of the Discourse. Following the philosophical tradition, Leibniz addresses this fundamental thing as substance. He figures that if something is compounded of other things, then when we break it down, eventually what we must have must be a thing without parts that cannot be further broken down. Substance must hence be a simple thing, which he calls monad, a term he invents that draws from the Greek word monas, meaning unity, and monos, meaning alone. Monad being a singular thing all by itself. He writes, "These monads are the real atoms of nature and, in a word, the elements of things." What are parts? Some parts of a machine are its gears, its screen, its wiring, but more importantly, even the left or right part of a thing are also parts, since we can separate the left part of, say, a piece of paper from its right part. We can then split it even further. In our contemporary layman understanding of physics, we arrive at something that cannot be further split, which are atoms. The term atom comes from atomos in Greek, meaning uncuttable, and is coined by the ancient Greek Democritus around the 4th century BCE to mean something that cannot be further divided. But this contemporary scientific understanding of atoms comes after Leibniz's time, in the 1800s, when chemist John Dalton realized that chemical compounds contain whole number ratios of its elements. This means that Leibniz's use of the word is not this contemporary understanding, but to mean what is fundamental, the most basic thing. He in fact goes further than most thinkers, reasoning that if there is no left or right part, no parts whatsoever, then to think of this substance as subsisting in space is wrong. To understand why Leibniz insists on this, we need to know who he is responding to. Leibniz was born in 1646, on the cusp of a new epoch in philosophy known as the modern era, which was launched by René Descartes, who lived from 1596 to 1650. Contrary to our contemporary parlance, which considers modernity as the present era, modernity in philosophy began in the 16th century. Why Descartes' thought is such a landmark is because he introduced the mathematization of knowledge, inaugurating a new method of scientific inquiry using quantification. Descartes is also known for his pithy phrase, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. He posits that there are two types of being, res extensa, the extended being, and res cogitans, the thinking being, of which the human being is both beings at once. To be extended is to take up space, which is characteristic of material objects. But Leibniz reasons that the most fundamental substance, the monads, do not take up space. Having no parts, they do not take up space nor even have shape. Hence, for the contemporary reader, it is best to consider Leibniz's reference to atoms to be merely metaphorical, as it can become rather confusing if we think of monads as atoms. By atoms, he simply means the most basic, most fundamental thing of which other non-monadic things are made of, and this thing, the monad, is not even material. Monads cannot be made by us or by nature, nor can it be destroyed. Everything that can be made by us or by nature must use what is basic. This basic thing must already pre-exist, since there is no way for nature to make something from nothing. A major aim for Leibniz's metaphysics is to explain how God did things. The first proposition of his Discourse on Metaphysics concerns divine perfection and that God does everything in the most desirable manner. In the Discourse, he gives several arguments for the existence of God, the chief one revisiting Anselm's and Descartes' ontological argument, which depends on the extreme nature of the notion of perfection. What is most perfect must surely exist, since if it did not exist, then it is less perfect than a perfect being that also exists. Hence, God, being the highest perfection, must exist. Since monads cannot be made nor destroyed by nature, it can only come into existence or be destroyed only by God's action. Monads are God's building blocks. Just like how monads have no parts and hence cannot be created or destroyed naturally, Monads cannot even be changed by external things, since for change to take place, its parts have to be moved, increased or decreased by those things. But since there are no parts, there can be no change by external factors. This inability to change from external factors means the monad is completely self-contained. In Leibniz's parlance, monads have no windows through which anything could come in or go out. However, monads can change, but the change comes from within, from an internal principle. A monad is complete in itself. It is a unity in itself. Hence, any change within the monad is within the nature of the monad. It does not come from external factors, but from within itself. A monad is self-sufficient. The way compounds are formed are through the compounding of monads, which are their elements. The qualities of these compounds come from the monads, which they are formed from. Since there is a diversity of things in the world, hence the monads underlying these things must also differ from one another and have differing qualities. Leibniz has previously been making a priori arguments based purely on reason without need for experience. But here, he appeals to what we experience in the world, making his argument for the difference between monads an a posteriori argument. The difference between things, including monads, is not extrinsic but intrinsic. He is not saying, for instance, that two chairs, identical in every way since they came out of the same manufacturing process using the same materials, are yet different because they differ in position in space. That difference in position is extrinsic, but Leibniz is claiming that in each monad, indeed in everything, there are intrinsic qualities within each individual thing that differs, making everything, including every monad, unique. Why? Because of his complete concept theory, which we will encounter later. The activity of monads is to perceive. Since everything is made of monads, even non-living and non-human animals are able to perceive. What causes change within the monad is its appetite, its desires. These desires cause it to shift from one perception to another. While a monad is simple, without parts, it can perceive a multiplicity of perceptions. Leibniz clarifies that perception is not consciousness. Consciousness is characterized by apperception, where a conscious being is one that is conscious about its perceptions and supported with the faculty of memory. One may have perceptions but is not conscious that it is having perceptions. The inability to perceive is inexplicable in material terms. If we enter inside a machine, we will see its innards of gears and parts, which interact with one another, but nowhere will we see anything that explains perception. Perception belongs to the monads, which the machine is made of. Perceptions are ever present. In the human being, even when our consciousness is turned off due to sleep, fainting, and death, we still have perceptions. Animals possessing memory react inductively based on their memories of prior experiences. Leibniz posits that human beings possess, in addition, knowledge of necessary and eternal truths, which forms the basis of our reason. Our reasoning ability allows us to think reflexively, what he earlier called apperception, where we recognize that we are the subjects of our perceptions, where we are able to think abstractly on ourselves, what it means to be a subject, to be a being, and even God, our limits, and God's lack of limits. Our reasoning is grounded on two rational principles, the principle of contradiction and the principle of sufficient reason. Our judgment is based on the principle of contradiction, where a proposition is false if it involves a contradiction, and is true when the proposition is contradictory to the false. According to Maria Rosa Antonessa, who wrote a very short introduction to Leibniz, Leibniz considers the principle of identity, where A equals to A, to be subsumed under the principle of contradiction, since A cannot be equal to not A. Hence A equals to not A, which equals to A. As for the principle of sufficient reason, all facts and true statements have sufficient reasons why they are true, although these reasons may not be known by us. The principle of sufficient reason entails an ineluctable chain of cause and effect, which means that all is determined. On the question of free will, Leibniz is a compatibilist. Compatibilism is a form of determinism where subjects do have a choice, though whatever they do choose is determined. Even though monads are immaterial, the principle of sufficient reason and hence cause and effect still applies. Every present state of a simple substance is naturally a consequence of its preceding state in such a way that its present is big with its future, he writes. In the Discourse on Metaphysics, where he does not talk about monads yet, Leibniz posits that in the notion of each thing is already contained everything that has and will happen to it. The notion of Julius Caesar contains how he will reach the Rubicon and cross it, even when it was still only an event in the future, even before he existed really. This is Leibniz's complete concept theory, where within the notion of a concept is contained all predications that can be made about it, of the past, present, and even the future. The completed concept found in a notion is possible because of the ineluctable chain of cause and effect, making the future calculable and hence known to a super-intelligent mind such as God's. Leibniz distinguishes between two kinds of truth, those of reasoning and those of fact, which corresponds to the principle of contradiction and the principle of sufficient reason, respectively. Truths of reasoning are a priori logical truths, making them necessary because their opposite is impossible. Either a square circle exists or it does not. Since a square circle is impossible, the truth of reasoning based on the principle of contradiction is that a square circle does not exist. It is a priori because we do not need any experience to tell us this. Indeed, it is not possible to experience the non-existent. We find the reasons for such truths through analysis, reducing them into simpler truths till we reach the basic truths that cannot be further reduced. For instance, the self-evident truths, definitions, and axioms. As for truths of fact, there are contingent truths. They are true, but their opposites are not logically impossible. For instance, I ate rice today, which is a truth of fact, but it is not logically impossible that I did not eat rice today, eating instead noodles. Yet there remains a sufficient reason for such a contingent truth, such as, I ate rice today because it was all I had at home. And the truth of why I only had rice at home has its own sufficient reason, which is that I did not go to the shops for something else, which has its own reasons. The chain of effects and causes continue downwards seemingly endlessly. As Leibniz noted when defining the principle of sufficient reason, we may not be able to know all the reasons, some of which may be driven by little perceptions below the level of our conscious awareness, where we may be unable to distinguish each perception distinctly because they are so small. We do become aware of them when they sum together to form a larger and more distinct perception. For instance, we do not see each individual drop of water in a wave, but we see the wave. When a bomb explodes, we do not hear the individual bits of explosive exploding, but we hear the roar of all of them together. Leibniz excludes the possibility of a tie, such as in the case of John Buridan's donkey. This donkey, equally hungry and thirsty, and placed equidistant between food and water, will, according to Buridan, die of both hunger and thirst, since it will be unable to decide which to consume first, equally torn between its desire for the two. This will not happen following Leibniz's thinking because little perceptions will tilt it to one side. For instance, a very slight shift in the air, placing the donkey just a little nearer the water. Earlier I mentioned how Leibniz used the ontological argument for the existence of God, which is an a priori argument. The principle of sufficient reason is another source of reasoning for the existence of God. As with my rice example, the reason why rice go on seemingly endlessly, but when traced to its end, will ultimately reach the first cause of everything. The final reason of things must be in a necessary substance, and this substance we call God, writes Leibniz, who considered this an a posteriori argument since it is from the experience of the chain of causation. Readers may recognize this as the cosmological argument for the existence of God. Leibniz reasons that this God on which everything is dependent has no limits and is absolutely perfect. Perfection measured by the amount of positive reality, meaning that God is the most real and hence most perfect substance. This also means that everything else will be less perfect since everything else is limited. God is the source of existence and essences, without which there will be nothing real, what is real coming from what is possible. Nothing would even be possible without God, according to Leibniz. Truths of reasoning can be reduced to eternal truths. Eternal truths do not depend on God's will. They are necessarily true, and even God cannot affect their necessity. For the truths of fact, they are contingent. However, Leibniz is a determinist. While truths of fact are contingent, Leibniz defines contingency as merely alternatives that are logically possible. Since God is perfect, he wills for the actual world to be the best of all possible worlds, meaning that whichever alternative is taken will in the big scheme of things be for the best, even if it seems morally dubious presently. God is the original and primary monad, and the creator of all the other monads. God has power, knowledge, and will. From his power comes all of creation. He uses his will to make changes and create, and given his knowledge, he wills what is best. All monads have the faculties of perception and appetition. In God, these faculties are infinite and perfect. The other monads imitate these attributes, but with lesser and varying degrees of perfection. Insofar as a thing acts, it has perfection, and insofar as it is acted on, it is imperfect. A monad can be active when it has distinct perceptions and passive when it has confused perceptions. The more a monad acts rather than is acted on, that is, the more active and less passive the monad is, the higher its degree of perfection. For one thing to be able to act on another, the other must be able to be acted on. Activities and passivities are mutual, writes Leibniz. One thing is a cause or reason, and another thing has an effect or outcome resulting from the cause of the former. Yet, Leibniz teaches that monads have no windows, meaning that their influence on one another is ideal. In the interaction between two objects, say ball A moving to collide with B and then B moving, A's motion and collision is the cause, and B's subsequent motion is the effect. But if monads have no windows, from where can this cause and effect come? Recall Leibniz's complete concept theory, that within the notion of a thing is every truth that can be truly predicated of it. Hence A's motion and collision with B, and B's reaction and subsequent motion, is already contained within their respective individual notions, in a pre-established harmony according to Leibniz. This applies between two things such as A and B, and extending this reason, there is a pre-established harmony throughout the universe between all things. Because each object adapts to every other object in a pre-established harmony, each having relations to every other, each object is a mirror of the universe, reflecting the behavior of everything, itself and every other thing. Each monad has its own perspective of the universe, and because of the different situation each is in, there are many perspectives the way different people in the same town will see the town from many different points of view, though they are all looking at the same town. However, while each monad reflects and can represent the entire universe, what is distinct to each monad's perception is only a small part, usually what is nearest or most relevant to them, analogous to how we may view a wide vista clearly with our eyes, but what is most distinct is what is nearby, while what is far away is faint or confused. Hence, monads are limited. If they could view everything clearly and distinctly, they would be like God. Different monads have different powers of perception, some being able to represent more of the universe more distinctly. The same applies to compounds. In theory, each thing contains information about the entire universe, even information about the past and future, not just of itself, as in the complete concept theory, but since it can represent the universe in its mirroring, even the past, present, and future of everything. However, it can only read what is represented distinctly to it, and cannot uncover the truth about everything because of the complexity of what will appear confused to it. Among all the various possible worlds, there is only one actual world according to Leibniz. The reason he gives is that God will choose the world that has the highest degree of perfection. He has the knowledge to know which it is among the infinity of possible worlds, the power to make it happen, and the goodwill to want the actual world to be the best one. Leibniz does not in this book explain why only one world can become actual. Following his thinking, since God is perfect and is the creator of the world, he will only make the best one and not make anything less than the best. Since there is only one best one, which is the most perfect one, the actual world will hence be the best of all possible worlds. This assumes that there are no ties with several possible worlds being equal in their degree of perfection. This assumption can be defended using the little perceptions argument aforementioned, that things are always slightly tilted to one side, tipping the balance in the situation close to a tie. The corollary of mutual adaptation in a pre-established harmony is that for one thing to be other than it actually is, for it to choose a different alternative from the one chosen, the entire universe has to change. The world will have to be a different possible world from the actual world. In addition, while at the total level of the universe, it may be the best possible, at a local level, the world may be horrible. However, without evil, there is no virtue. Without poverty, there can be no charity. Without pain and suffering, there can be no relief that comes from the alleviation of pain and suffering. Without despair, there will be no need for hope. There can be no higher order goods without lower order evils. Yet, why does someone have to be downtrodden just so that another can be kind? Even those who can understand this rationally may find it hard to accept as it runs contrary to our sense of fairness. To reconcile the problem of evil with a perfect God, Leibniz had written Theodicy, published in 1710, that is, before he wrote the Monadology. I have not yet read it. Perhaps I will at some point, but at this point, I do not know if it will offer remedy to this sense of unfairness or merely insist on the logic of a perfect world. Is that the problem, the presumption of God's perfection? Or is it our understanding of what perfection entails? As Leibniz infers, the monads which are creations of a perfect being are limited, that is, less than perfect, simply because God will otherwise be creating gods. Underlying all of this is the implicit assumption that for a standard of perfection to exist, there must necessarily exist lesser degrees of perfection. Leibniz's metaphysics does have a curious result. The creation of a perfect being is less than perfect, though things still work out to be the best that is possible. What is the best possible, even for a perfect being, is not perfect. So maybe we should not be so hard on ourselves, when our best efforts fail to deliver perfect outcomes. Monads, when compounded into a body, represent more distinctly that body. Because the universe is the best of all possible worlds, the universe has a perfect order. Hence the soul, the body and its parts are orderly. Leibniz posits that the bodies of living things are divine machines. He compares a man-made machine, where some parts may not be themselves machines, for instance, when it uses raw materials directly. However, in the case of a living body, Leibniz believes that even down to their smallest parts, that they are still machines. This observation is up to date with the science of his day, the microscope being invented in the 1590s, and Robert Hooke discovering cells in 1665. Though Leibniz does not reference either in this book, the cell is an organic machine. Leibniz goes further, believing that matter is infinitely divisible. He, like Blaise Pascal, who is from a generation before him, believes that even at the micro levels are worlds containing creatures that are even smaller, and this goes on ad infinitum. Each of these creatures is constituted by its own monads. Each living thing is hence a compound of infinitely many monads, but has a dominant monad, which is the soul. Souls and monads are not separated from bodies except for God. Since monads cannot be created nor destroyed except by God, the bodies of monads experience developments and growth, but also envelopments and diminutions. How I understand this is that just like the scientific principle of conservation of mass states that matter can never be destroyed nor created but just changed from one form to another, where the atoms of a piece of paper do not disappear after being burned but becomes ash and carbon dioxide, the monads likewise take on other physical forms after its host dies. For instance, a dead fish becomes food for a shark, which then becomes part of the shark's body. Leibniz's solution to Descartes' mind-body problem is pre-established harmony. The body obeys efficient causes while monads obey final causes through their appetitions, ends, and means. That is, their desires, objectives, and resources. But they are in sync with one another through the pre-established harmony that harmonizes all things in the universe. The material realm to which the body belongs and the immaterial realm to which the soul belongs are in sync because of pre-established harmony. I had earlier referred to Leibniz as an idealist, but it seems according to his theory that the material realm can exist, though it is only a representation of the immaterial realm, since what is real are monads. Since there is pre-established harmony, to analyze just one of the two realms will suffice, keeping in mind that the realm of the monads, the immaterial realm, is what is real, while the material realm is just a representation. Leibniz is a panpsychist. Broadly, there are three levels of monads. Those capable of sensation are souls. Those which, in addition to sensation, are also capable of self-consciousness and reason are minds. Those that lack all such capabilities are bare monads. While Leibniz, early in the Monadology, has established that monads cannot be changed by external forces since they have no windows, they can change, albeit from internal impetus. For instance, the monad that belongs to human sperm is a soul, capable of sensation, but when the sperm becomes a human being through conception, this soul becomes a mind, capable of reason and consciousness. So monads can progress or deteriorate through the three levels of the hierarchy of monads. Souls mirror the universe, while minds mirror God. This makes minds capable of understanding how the universe works and enables minds to have a relationship with God. The sum of all spirits composes the city of God, a moral world in the natural world. God is the architect of the mechanism of the universe and also the monarch of the divine city of spirits or minds, the moral lawgiver. A perfect and pre-established harmony also exists between the natural and moral world. The natural world is the physical realm, while the moral world is the realm of grace. Hence the ways of nature also leads to grace, and vice versa. Because of this harmony between the natural and moral world, between God's role as world architect and moral king, Leibniz tells us that the results of moral goodness or sin manifest physically in physical rewards or punishments, though not necessarily immediately, which is what the Hindus terms karma. If we can adequately understand the order within the universe, we will recognize that it is the best of all possible worlds, impossible to be better and attached to God. Leibniz's metaphysics of the monads may seem imaginative, if not downright fanciful, but is it really any more bizarre compared to other metaphysical systems such as the Platonic theory of forms, Aristotle's hylomorphism, Benedictus de Spinoza's pantheism, Neoplatonic emanation, Charles Sanders Peirce's order from randomness, or the myriad of religious doctrines? Is it in fact any more bizarre than the doctrine of materialism which represents today's scientistic worldview? The principles which he derives his theory from, such as the principle of contradiction and the principle of sufficient reason, are the same principles that underlie most rational investigations, both philosophical and scientific. The God-centered teleology of his metaphysics is also not unique, with important thinkers from antiquity to the present, from Plato, Spinoza, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, George Berkeley, Nicolas Malebranche, Pascal, Immanuel Kant to Henry Bergson. I leave you to figure which living philosopher deserves to be added to the list, who considers the divine as part, if not integral, to their understanding of reality. I too struggle with this element of Leibniz's metaphysics, which is central to its development, since I am not a believer. Without the divine element, monads, the principles, and even pre-established harmony can stand, but we no longer can have the confidence that this is the best of all possible worlds. Some of his ideas, such as the divine machinery even at the lowest levels, ties in with our contemporary understanding of cells, though as explained, cells were already discovered in his day. Modern atomic theory was still over a century away, postulating the final limit of the division of matter being the atom, but Leibniz already was talking about infinite divisibility. While not quite yet infinite divisibility, the atom has since been split, unveiling new horizons of minuteness as we continue to penetrate the heart of the atom. Fractal theory resembles his smaller worlds upon worlds. Possible world semantics is now part of the basic toolbox for logicians. Even if we do not accept his metaphysics in its entirety, we may be hard-pressed to firstly articulate what is wrong with it and then to propose a better one, though the contemporary reader may argue that materialism has already laid to rest all such speculative metaphysical theories. This is also not a new view. It gained force in the modern era of philosophy with Descartes' mechanistic explanations and mathematical quantification of nature as method for the sciences. That is, precisely in Leibniz's time. Leibniz, in fact, is reacting to this metaphysics of materialism in his Discourse on Metaphysics, firstly to argue for the role of an intelligent designer to give meaning to existence, instead of merely the necessity of physical laws or randomness. And secondly, to argue that mechanical geometric rules are not sufficient to necessitate the phenomena we observe. For instance, why mass energy is conserved instead of some other physical parameter. On the former, he writes, as if to account for a great conquest that a prince made when taking some important position, a historian tried to say that it is because the corpuscles of the gunpowder, being released at the touch of a spark, escaped with a speed capable of impelling a hard and heavy body, instead of showing how the foresight of the conqueror made him choose the suitable time and means, and how his power overcame all obstacles. To Leibniz, it is materialism that is the bizarre and absurd metaphysical theory, because the essential of physical cause without the final cause is not sufficient reason. In conclusion, given that Leibniz is a committed Christian, It only makes sense that he will incorporate his belief in God into his metaphysics to develop a metaphysics for Christianity. For those who do not believe, let it then be our dialectical challenge to try to develop a metaphysics without God, and yet not fall prey to the nihilism of reductive materialism. To do this, we need to account for the arising of matter, but more crucially, consciousness, without appeal to divine creation, the latter emerging from natural processes or being already there from the start, following Leibniz's panpsychism. We need to account for whether we need a teleology. If yes, where can it come from given that we have put aside the God theory? Can teleology be a work in development, fluid and changing as reality unfolds? Is such a teleology at all? Or is teleology implicit in the conditions of existence, such as the will to survive, the conatus to persist? If we do not need a teleology, what does this mean for our individual and collective existence? Is there a cosmic fairness actualized through karmic reincarnation, or does fairness simply fade into obscurity the more we zoom out to the level of the total, the absolute, the way Leibniz has it? The inquiry continues. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.